they were talking about the origin of the shapes of the
Mhm.
letters, and they were talking about how the A is like a bull's head, right?
Mhm.
That was sort of like, and then like all the different letters and whatnot, they all had some symbolic representation back to something.
Mhm.
And it kind of made me think of like when you were talking about the eurythmy, like what is language? like
Mhm.
I'm starting to get to that point where I'm just questioning language
Mhm.
all in. Like what is it? It's the
Mhm.
most mysterious thing that I can think of.
Yeah.
And it's also like one of the first things that happens, at least from the biblical accounts.
Mm. In the context of like written letters, if we're using the analogy between um, written letters and like the gestures of eurythmy, then it would be perhaps there would be, like this historical analysis. I don't know how, I don't think that it could be done because I think that there's like an infinite amount of these symbols, right? And they're kind of, but at the same time, the phrase primordial movements came into my mind
Mm,
when you started um, that line of thinking, and I think that is kind of a way that Steiner conceptualized it in the sense that, like, for example, one gesture that was very significant to him was this vertical, um, holding your hands up, but also just sanding. Like he said that the act of going from a four limbed, like walking on the ground like a bear or something, to standing up, he said this was like of supreme significance. And like, um, so that kind of reminded me of that.
it's just making me think, man,
Yeah.
because I think about the power of language and Adam, what does he do? It's like the first job is a mental job of naming things. And think of every magic system you can think of. It all almost always revolves around naming things or having the true name
Mhm.
of something. It's just one of those things that it's like the infinite rabbit hole, right?
Yeah.
It's like where do you start? It's a chicken and egg thing, really.
Mhm.
Everything we do through language. You know, you can't think of anything without it. You can't describe anything without it.
Yeah.
Um, Nothing, no invention's ever been made without it. It's deeply interconnected with everything.
Mm. Yeah, it reminds me of yeah. Well, yeah, because we were talking about like myths and symbolism, because that's like the Peugeot things that reality is this language, the language of creation, right?
Hmm.
And it's like the language is these symbolic, these patterns that play out, right? And symbolism is the application of the patterns at various scales. It's like the ability
Yeah.
to kind of see the patterns as they manifest in various instances, right? Um, but he kind of conceptualized it as a language of like these, just you can almost think about them as like a series of patterns or something, right? Like the pattern of patterns um, is at the root of all or something. But then that
Well,
also reminds me of uh, the CTMU folk, right?
mm, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like
No, go ahead, go ahead.
yeah. Like Langdon will contend that Matthew Peugeot perhaps stole this idea from him. Um, I don't know if he still
Okay.
would. And yeah,
I would definitely lean towards Langdon being wrong on this
yeah,
one. As I'm listening to Martin Shaw talk a lot about the mythology and the symbolism built into the mythology, it correlates with what Peugeot's talking about. It's like Peugeot didn't just invent this stuff.
hmm
He also got it from a lot of these mythological stories and this mythological symbolism.
hmm
It's the things like
yeah,
it's the white flower and the red flower, and it's like which one do you eat?
yeah. I don't even like really follow this. I'm really not trying to get into this. I only
Yeah,
bring it up is because like it's interesting that you can also like there's different ways of understanding reality as a language, right? And like
mm,
I think I don't know, it's more evidence to your suggestion that it's like this infinitely deep idea that when we see it popping up in different areas and such. Yeah, that's really all. That's interesting. I definitely think that there's stuff to be learned from the CTMU, and like maybe
Oh,
I don't know
yeah,
if I would
no.
jump to the whole idea that it's like, you know, this is the thing and it's like everything else, you know, I don't know. I'm
It
not one to really take. I really liked Steiner's, in the video I just recently posted about eurythmy. He said, the Waldorf principle is not to promote a particular thing, but it's like a method of learning and stuff, and like principles of education. And like I like to, if I can't post some Chris Langan clips without getting like, you know, like people thinking that I'm a CTMU like shill, then
Oh, that's
you know what I
funny.
mean?
I'll post it
Yeah.
for you. How about that? I'll post some CTMU
No,
stuff.
I'm
I'll
gonna
get it.
keep posting them, man. I'll
I'll
let
get it going,
people
man.
unsubscribe, let them unsubscribe, man. It's like, yeah.
No, I think I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and say he's wrong because I don't know. I don't know enough about it, right?
Mhm.
But I also don't have enough energy to put into it.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think that's probably one valid criticism that could be brought against it is that it's not like an accessible.
it doesn't have a story.
Yeah, exactly.
If it had a story, I think I'd be a
Yeah,
hell
like
of a
the
lot
story
more
of the
into it.
CTMU is Chris Langan like writing stuff down,
Hmm.
right?
And then a handful of people, um, I don't know, thinking that
Yeah.
they're conveying the same message out appropriately, but
Mm.
I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe he
Yeah,
should like,
needs a story.
really, maybe should, I think if he could, if he really leaned into like the origin story of it, maybe or something,
or
like,
or integrate it into a story.
yeah, that's real, it's like, how do we, yeah, I don't know. I think I, I have a lot of respect for, Tommy, doing the CTMU Singularity. Like
Hey, he
I think
seems like a
he's,
really smart kid.
yeah, and also, but not just that, it's also like I admire his, intellectual kind of not just curiosity, but it's like the kind of laborious aspect of like he's really laying it all out and like you can tell that he's like trying to make it understandable and stuff, I don't know, it's basically, just because I have hesitations about the CTMU, I'm not trying to,
Well,
I'll talk shit about Langdon before I'll talk shit about Tommy. you know
what
yeah.
about this one? I mean, have you ever looked into Wolfram stuff?
A little bit. I
Stephen,
have a Wolfram clip on my channel.
dude, Stephen
um
Wolfram, man, that guy, he talks some wild stuff too.
mm,
Like you look at some of his hypergraphs and the way that whole
yeah.
um just the
Yeah.
way that whole thing goes together.
Yeah,
I don't
I'm
know.
not quite as familiar with that one.
His
But like,
physics project, man, the physics project
yeah.
that they're working on, it's got some pretty interesting stuff. It's really hard to follow though,
Mhm.
but it sounds really cool.
One thing that I really find interesting about the CTMU is the idea of the heading of assembly bodies, where it's like Jesus ascended and becomes the head of a larger body. It's like one level up type of thinking.
Hmm.
And when I mentioned the galactic center, the way that I phrased it was like maybe beauty is largely to do with what our galactic center finds beautiful. But another way of phrasing it would be we are the extended body of the galactic center type of thing. It's like how the sun, it's like the planets would be the extended body, like the solar system as a being or
Hmm.
something like that. And we don't really, when we look at it, we can't really comprehend it because it's one level up or something. But maybe this idea where it wouldn't just be like the black hole is conscious. It's like we all participate in the consciousness of the galaxy, kind of like the cells in a body, except it's just at this different scale. And I think that that's a CTMU idea. Like I think that that's something that they've
Yeah,
developed a bunch there. Again, I'm
I
not,
I'd have to go back and look. Like I've gotten the whatever, I've gotten the Cliff Notes version of it a couple of times.
Hmm.
but I couldn't tell you much about it other than, I remember there being, I don't know, tellers and
Hmm.
I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
It does sound very
I'm pretty
interesting.
much in the same boat, to be honest. Like I
Yeah.
don't really, I've picked up various concepts and stuff, but I've yet to like grok the idea,
Yes, grokking it.
Yes.
We cannot constellate it appropriately.
Yeah.
Have you read any Barfield stuff? It's heavy, man. It's really, really heavy stuff. And this
Mm.
one, Saving the Appearances in particular, it is it's entirely about, at least in the beginning, it talks all about participation, like the main different, like sort of like the difference between the proposition and the participatory
Is
knowing
that the
kind
one
of
where he talks
thing.
about beta thinking?
Oh yeah, yep,
Yeah.
yeah. Because like back in the day, everyone like to say truth, like the scientific people like to say today, like it was they wouldn't do it. It just was it's like, yeah, we collectively agree on it.
Yeah. It's so interesting to think about, how these different modes really do change like the world that we inhabit. I think there's so much, I think a lot of stuff when it comes to Christianity and the story of Jesus and his life, it's like there's probably a lot that was embedded in the unspoken context. There's probably so many things that were just taken for granted, that they
Oh,
didn't even think to write them down or say them out loud.
yeah. No, I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Um, it's hard to even it's hard to fathom,
Yeah,
really.
and I don't mean to say this in a polemical sense, but more so just in like hopefully a mind-opening way where it's like there really is, I think like literacy comes to mind as well, like the literate mind is a great example of this, where I think this shift into participation, this switch is kind of happening, and then reality
Yeah.
is different. Like there is
Well,
or something.
man, Dan, yeah, you saying literacy though, it really is a trigger. You
Mm.
know, literacy did something to us that is it's hard to wrap your mind
Yeah,
around.
so
Um,
deep.
yeah, I think it probably has much more. I bet you literacy probably is the switch. Because yes, there were certain people who had literacy, but most, the vast majority of people didn't. And when you think about people's collective associations becoming this sort of, it's something about like when they were able to do what is it? It goes, the beta thinking is thinking about thinking, right? Well, that
I don't
became,
remember it exactly.
yeah, it's something like our collective associations or representations combined together with our alpha thinking is what makes objectivity. And then beta thinking is being able to think about thinking about things. And literacy is sort of like the literacy is sort of that turning point of really being able to sort of dial up that beta thinking to an extreme level
Yeah.
because people who are illiterate can't do it as
Hmm.
well. So it's almost like that just
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah, and I think a temporal sense comes into that as well.
Mhm.
Thinking about like returning and reflecting on things, you get this kind of
Yes.
feedback thing that's happening in a
Yeah, you
way.
almost get a second questioning too. Before I always thought like, oh yeah, it's a good thing. You can go and you iterate, you
Mm.
iterate over and over and over again. But it also can be really bad too.
Yeah.
Mainly because it just kills the damn like it killed the imagination. Like that's I think the thing that I'm seeing most of all that's been damaged is sort of the imaginative, enchanted mind,
Mm.
enchanted world of everything. It just something happened.
Yeah. And
I don't like
yeah, I
it.
think I really, yeah, I fully agree.
Literacy also transforms the symbolism
In a way. Like,
in a sense that it made the abstracted symbols of the spoken word into this,
Yeah.
it transformed it into this written word
Yeah. And we went,
where,
it's no longer a visual, uh,
yes.
iconographic, pictographic, like,
Mm-hmm.
thinking about, like ideograms, like in Chinese, like it's gone to this once or twice removed thing based on audio perception primarily.
Well, I guess I just
Yeah.
keep trying to think about whatever, some of these basic core mythological concepts of like, why is red important? Why is white important? Why the white horse, or whatever it is, you know? And I don't think it's got anything necessarily to do with the written language. Like, I think it goes way, way, way deeper,
Mm.
and it's probably got a lot like, I think something actually got
Yeah.
severed.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Especially when thinking about body language as a form of language. These patterned qualities, they definitely go before literacy, 100%.
You're constantly talking about this very difficult, unexplainable thing, right? This unspoken language, this unspoken the communication in the silence. It's almost like that is the meaning that's built into the symbolism.
Do
You know what I
elaborate.
mean? Do I?
Please say more. Like,
Well, it's just like, okay, we say, we talk about the symbolism, and we point it out, but the meaning and the connections is there before you point it out, right? It's like there's something about it just sitting there.
yeah, that seems right to me. Yeah.
You know, it's like in this raw state, but the second you point at it, like it it comes.
Hmm.
I don't know.
It's the same impulse that happens when our critical mind comes in and starts
Mm,
talking about it.
mm-hmm,
Or like, how is this going to be perceived or something? Or
mm,
like, or just trying to articulate an idea when you get inspired and then you're trying to write it down.
yeah,
It's like,
and then
or kind of
like
like
what
trying to write down.
happens to it, right?
Yeah. 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 And kind of trying to write
Mm.
down a dream, perhaps.
Oh,
It's
oh,
like,
that's a good one.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's very similar when it comes to our understanding of symbolism and our understanding of each other. It's
Hmm.
like we can try and put it into articulated sounds, mouth
Mm.
noises, and
But you
uh,
can't though, right?
you
Because
can't.
it always gets
I don't know. Yeah, I
in
always
the
hesitate.
interface. In the interface, it gets messed up, right? It gets. I don't know. It's like
Yeah.
it's not clean anymore.
Hmm.
Like it gets distorted just slightly.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always hesitate when I say that I can't, that it's not about the spoken words, because there's something about like, in the beginning was the word. We don't want to denigrate the spoken word, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's to be resolved in a reframing of how we think about words in that pre-literate, perhaps pre-rational mode, which
Mm.
is constantly underlying it and which is the basis of this symbolic patterning of reality, which we try and describe, whether you're Jonathan Bijot or anyone else trying to describe it. Um, that I think that implicit thing can shine through words as well sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
And
No, I agree. It
right?
does. It does. All these
Yeah,
stories, all of these
yeah,
every last one of these fairy tales, all of them. Right? It's like, why? That's what I was telling you. It's like, why did they pick red? Like, why a red flower?
yeah.
Why a white flower? It's like there's something deep that drives them to do it, and
Hmm.
I don't think they know why or where
Hmm.
it comes from.
I mean, particularly in an actual when we're talking though, it's like
Mm,
when we're
okay, okay.
it's like maybe when Jesus goes to say something, rather than interrupting that ever-present truth that is resonant in the patterns or something, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like he is able to carry that into the words, because
Mm,
that's how Steiner thought about eurythmy too, is that this vocal action in the larynx is the same thing. It's the same movement that happens through eurythmy. It's
mm,
just like more focused there. And he actually thought about words as more blocked up and that the moving body was more, it's the fuller expression of speaking in a way.
Okay.
But I wonder if maybe it's either like that or if it's maybe the other way where it's like the speaking is the concrescence of the movement or something. I don't know.
Hmm.
Maybe some stuff to think about.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Some of my
But
favorite topics, man.
yeah, man, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I love it.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah, we'll have
Um,
to catch up again sometime soon.
yeah, like,
I'm usually hesitant to do calls and particularly recordings after a day of work because sometimes I can barely think straight.
yeah.
But we did it today. What
Hey,
seemingly all right. So maybe we can do it again some other
must be that
time.
new moon,
Yeah,
man. That's what it
could
is.
be, could be.
It's a whole new cycle.
And if
Yeah,
not,
yeah, I can still
maybe we
probably
should
make a
stop
call
the
though.
recording